A pleasant day to each and everyone, especially to our instructor, Mom Janina Sinswat. Good day, Mom.
Allow us to introduce ourselves. I am Aslamia K. Mentang,
And I am Shahida S. Karinda, a BS Ed English student.
and we are the Group 13 reporters.
And we are given a task to discuss to you the Rizal's life, works, and writings during his time in Hong Kong.
But before we start our discussion, let's just watch a short video for us to know more about Rizal's life.
The life of Rizal was truly admirable. He was indeed a hero, for he bravely fought for our lands towards the colonizers. So, let me share with you some facts about Rizal. Do you know how many languages that Rizal can speak? For the information of everybody, Rizal can speak 22 languages including Spanish, French, Japanese, English, and many more.
Another fact about Rizal. At what age did Rizal learn to read and write? Well, at the age of 5, he was able to learn to read and write. Now, let us proceed to our proper discussion.
Shortly after the publication of El Filibusterismo, Rizal left Europe and he lived in Hong Kong. from November 1891 to June 1892. His reason for leaving the Europe were as follows. First, life was unbearable in Europe due to his political differences with Marcelo H. del Pilar and other Filipinos in Spain. Second, to lead the propaganda movement in Hong Kong. And third, to be near to his beloved Philippines and a family. Before sailing to Hong Kong, he told Del Pilar that he could not write anymore for La Solidaridad, that he was retiring from Spain's political arena to preserve unity among the Filipinos in Europe, and that despite their parting of the ways, he would always have highest regard for him. Rizal spent 7 happy months in Hong Kong, where his persecuted family joined him. He had a lucrative medical practice. He won new friends, including British and Portuguese. He is conceived the Filipino colonization of Borneo, and he wrote freely without fear of persecution.
To begin with, let us discuss about Rizal Goes to Hong Kong. On October 18, 1891, Rizal, after a brief sojourn in Paris from Ghent, left Marseilles for Hong Kong on board the SS Melbourne. By leaving Marseilles, he carried a letter of introduction for Manuel Camus, a compatriot living in Singapore, which is written by Juan Luna. As he described, his trip was delightful, heavenly, in his own opinion. Writing to Blumentritt on October 22, 1891, he said, "Since we left Marseilles, we have had magnificent weather." He said that because he saw that the sea is calm, placid like a glass, the sky is blue, the air is fresh and invigorating. Truly, it is a heavenly trip. In their trip, there were over 80 first-class passengers, and mostly of them are Europeans, including 2 Spaniards who were going to Amoy. Rizal was the only Asian among them. As usual, he amazed his fellow passenger because of his knowledge of many languages and his skill in sketching. He befriended with many missionaries, Italian, Franciscans, and French Jesuits, and they are all going to China.
And one evening, at a dinner time, the passengers were having their meal in the dining room. Rizal, being the only Asian, was eating alone at one table. Near him was a bigger table occupied by some German ladies who were gaily eating and gossiping about the lone Asian male who was quietly taking his meal. Rizal, who was fluent in German, understood what the talkative German ladies were saying about him, but he simply kept silent, letting the ladies enjoy their gossip. Suddenly, the fast-running steamer encountered a heavy squall, and the door of the dining room was blown open. Nobody among the passengers who were busy eating stood up to close the door. A lady said to her companions in German, "If this man in front of us were a gentleman, he would close the door." Upon hearing her remark, Rizal, without saying a word, rose and closed the door. After which he resumed his seat. He then converged with German ladies in perfect German. Of course, the German ladies were very much embarrassed, and thereafter they treated Rizal with admiration and respect. Despite his brown skin, for he was a cultured gentleman.
So now, let us talk about Rizal's early days in Hong Kong. Rizal arrived in Hong Kong on November 20, 1891, and he was welcomed by the Filipino resident, especially his old friend named Jose Maria Basa. He also established his residence at number 5 D. Aguilar Street, number 2 Rednecella Terrace, where he also opened his medical clinic. And on December 1, 1891, he wrote his parents asking their permission to return home. On the same date, his brother-in-law Manuel P. Hidalgo sent him a letter telling the sad news about deportation of 25 persons from Calamba, including his father, Neneng, Sisa, Lucia, Pasiano, and the rest of us. Hidalgo also stated in his letter that he was preparing a letter to the Queen Regent of Spain, explaining the Calamba situation in order to secure justice. If the Queen will not listen, he said, we will write to Queen Victoria of England, appealing for protection in the name of humanity. Hidalgo's letter clearly revealed the despair and sorrow of the Rizal family. Dr. Rizal in Hong Kong, who is so close to Manila, was desperately sad, for he could not help his persecuted family and relatives.
But you know what? Shortly before Christmas, Rizal was gladdened by the arrival of his father, brother, and Silvestre Ubaldo, his brother-in-law, in Hong Kong. And not long afterwards, his mother and sister Lucia, Josepa Pangoy, and Trinidad also arrived. His mother was 65 years old at that time and was almost blind, for she had suffered so much from the Spanish brutality and injustice. The year before, Rizal's mother was arrested on the flimsy charge that she was not using her official surname of Riolonda, and despite her advanced age and blindness, she was again forced to go by land to Santa Cruz, the capital of Laguna, as what happened in 1872. Fortunately, the Spanish government of Laguna, who was a gallant cavalier, set her free. And finally, the Christmas of 1891 in Hong Kong was one of the happiest Yuletide celebration in Rizal's life, for he had a happy family reunion. On January 31, he wrote to Blumentritt, her friend, recounting their pleasant life in Hong Kong, as follows. Here we are all living together, my parents, sisters, and brother, in peace and far from the persecution they suffered in the Philippines. They are very much pleased with the English government.
After we talked about Rizal's early days in Hong Kong, now we will proceed to talk about his medical practice in Hong Kong. So, just to earn a living for himself and for his family, Rizal practiced medicine in Hong Kong. There was a Portuguese physician named Dr. Lorenzo P. Marquez, who became his friend and admirer, helped him to build up a wide clientele. In recognition of Rizal's skill as an ophthalmic surgeon, he turned over to him many of his eye cases.
And in due time, Dr. Rizal became a successful and well-known medical practitioner in the British colony. He had many patients, including British, Chinese, and Portuguese and Americans. For the second time, he successfully operated on his mother's eye so that she was able to read and write again. Aside from being an eye specialist, he was also a general practitioner. He again wrote to Blumentritt on January 31, 1892. He said, "Here I practice as a doctor and I have clients. I have here many sick of influenza because there is an epidemic. Through the newspaper, I am informed that this sickness is also causing ravages in Europe. I hope you and your esteemed family will be spared. In our house, my mother, my brother-in-law, and one of my sisters are sick. Thank God they are out of danger." Rizal had all the qualities of an eye specialist, par excellence, and because of the many patients of different nationalities who had consulted him for treatment and get well, his name as an eye surgeon landed in various newspapers, magazines, and medical journals because of his good reputation as a physician and ophthalmologist. People with the same profession recognize his remarkable contribution in the practice of medical science involving eye diseases. Dr. Ariston Bautista Lin from Paris sent him a congratulatory note accompanied by a book of diagnostic pathology. Don Antonio Virgil de Dios, a kind-hearted man, offered him his service for the purchase of medical books, equipments, and instruments which he might need in the practice of his medical profession. From Beatrice, the wealthy Mr. Edward Busted, Adelina's father, sent him a letter on March 21, 1892, for he praised Rizal for practicing his medical profession.
In Europe, the Filipino friends of Rizal learned his medical practice in Hong Kong and gave him their assurance as moral and financial support. According to Dr. Hermiano de Ocampo, an accomplished Filipino ophthalmologist, Rizal is a man of vision who sees far ahead. possessed all the qualities of a great eye specialist. He had a keen and analytical intellect, lightness of touch, deep knowledge of medicine and ophthalmology, and had been properly adequately trained by master ophthalmic surgeons. If only he had devoted his lifetime to the practice of medicine, he would become one of Asia's eminent ophthalmologists.
So now, let's just talk about Borneo colonization project of Rizal in Hong Kong. So Rizal planned Filipino colonization in Borneo. With the kind of socio-political climate under the administration of Governor General Valeriano Weyler, the Calambatanan farmers and other townsfolk seemed hopeless to have a better quality of life. So Rizal planned and conceived an idea of how the management of these human resources could be utilized. He fully knew with empathy the pain and suffering of these poor Filipinos, that life in his country was becoming unbearable. So he thought of founding a Filipino colony in Borneo. When his friends in Europe heard about his plan, Graciano Lopez Haina, Antonio and Juan Luna, Dr. Ariston Bautistelin, and Professor Blumentritt were delighted and enthusiastically willing to endorse and support the project. Graciano Lopez Haina, in his letter to Rizal on May 26, 1892, he expressed his intention to join the colony and said, "I have great desire of joining you. Reserve for me a piece of land there where I can plant sugarcane. Send me further information."
For Rizal and his friends, even if the project was laudable, his brother-in-law Manuel Hidalgo did not approve the plan. "This idea about Borneo is not good. Why should we leave the Philippines, this beautiful country of ours?" he told Rizal. On the other hand, Rizal made a side trip to Sandakan, to atmosphere to see for himself of the place, the condition where he intended of the land to move, and his general family. Meantime, Governor Weyler was relieved of his administrative function as governor and was replaced by Governor Ilugio Dispuhol. Rizal, armed with an intense desire to help the landless people, and was determined to push through the project. With the new leadership of Governor Dispuhol in his province, fresh hopes hold promise, because upon assumption to office, he announced a new program of government. Rizal, full of optimism, he sent Governor Dispuhol a letter of felicitation and offered his cooperation. To his surprise, Rizal did not even receive an acknowledgement answer from the said governor.
Rizal's sense of values and dedication to be of service to the Filipino people was anchored on hard work, determination, and perseverance. So for the second time, he sent the Governor General another letter requesting him to allow the landless Filipinos to establish a colony in Borneo. Rizal did not receive any reply, but instead, the Governor General notified the Spanish Consul General in Hong Kong to tell Rizal that he could not approve his request, allowing Filipino immigration to Borneo and stating, among other things, that it was not very patriotic to go off and cultivate a foreign soil. The last letter he sent to Governor General Espuhol was a letter of requesting permission to change his nationality and immigrate with his family and other townmates in Calamba who cared to join him in Borneo. Rizal received no reply at all.
Our next discussion is all about Rizal's writing in Hong Kong. Notwithstanding the pressure of his medical practice and his Borneo colonization project, Rizal continued his writings. He wrote Ang Mga Karapatan ng Tao, which is the Tagalog translation of the rights of the man, proclaimed by the French revolutionists in 1789. About the same time, 1891, he also wrote A la Nación Española, to the Spanish nation, which is an appeal to Spain to right the wrongs done to the Calamba tenants. Another proclamation entitled Sa Mga Kababayan, to My Countrymen, was written in December 1891, explaining the Calamba agrarian situation.
Rizal contributed articles to the British daily newspaper, the Hong Kong Telegraph, whose editor, Mr. Fraser Smith, was his friend. Copies of this newspaper entered the Philippines so that the Filipino people were able to read the Rizal's article. The vigilant Spanish censors soon discovered the Hong Kong, the spread newspaper of Rizal's ideas, and immediately banned. On March 2, 1892, Rizal wrote Una Visita a la Victoria Gaol, a visit to Victoria Gaol, an account of his visit to the colonial prison of Hong Kong. In this article, he contrasted the cruel Spanish prison system with the modern and more humane British prison system. To elucidate his pet Borneo colonization project, he wrote an article in French entitled Colonisation du British North Borneo, for des families de les Philippines, colonization of British North Borneo by families born from the Philippine island. He elaborated the same idea in another article in Spanish, Proyecto de Colonización del British North Borneo for Filipinos, Project of the Colonization of British North Borneo by the Filipinos. In June 1892, he wrote La Mano Roja, the Red Hand, which was printed in sheet form in Hong Kong. It renounces the frequent outbreak of international fires in Manila.
The most important writing made by Rizal during his Hong Kong sojourn was the Constitution and bylaws of the Liga Filipina, which was printed in Hong Kong in 1892. To deceive the Spanish authorities, the printed copies carry the false information that the printing was done by the London Printing Press, number 25 Hulog Street, London. The idea of establishing the Liga Filipina, or the Philippine League, an association of patriotic Filipinos for civic purposes, was originally conceived by Jose Maria Basa. But it was Rizal who wrote its constitution and realized its establishment. Copies of the printed Liga Constitution were sent by Rizal to Domingo Franco, which is his friend in Manila. You know what, partner, the most important writing of Rizal during his time in Hong Kong was the La Liga Filipina.
Can you tell us more about this La Liga Filipina?
Well, let me explain to you what was all about La Liga Filipina. La Liga Filipina was also known as the Philippine League. It was a secret organization and it was founded by Jose Rizal in the house of Doroteo Onghuangco at Ilaya Street, Tondo, Manila on July 3, 1892. The said organization was derived from La Solidaridad and the propaganda movement. The purpose of La Liga Filipina was to build a new group that sought to involve the people directly in the reform movement. This leg was to be a sort of mutual aid and self-help society, dispensing scholarship funds and legal aid, loaning capital and setting up cooperatives. The League also became a threat to Spanish authorities that they arrested Rizal on July 6, 1892. Then he was sent to the Pitan. And then during the exile of Rizal, the organization became inactive through or because of the efforts of Domingo Franco and Andres Bonifacio. They was reorganized it. The organization decided to declare its support for La Solidaridad and the reforms it advocated, including raise of funds for the paper and defray the expenses of deputies advocating reforms for the country before the Spanish Cortes. Eventually, after some disarray in the leadership of the group, the Supreme Council of the League dissolved the society. The Liga membership split into two groups when it is about to be rebuilt. These were the conservative form, the Cuerpo de Compromisarios, which pledged to continue supporting the La Solidaridad, while the radicals led by Bonifacio devoted themselves to a new and secret society, which was the Katipunan.
So now, let's just talk about Rizal's decision to return to Manila. So, on May 18, 1892, Rizal made up his mind and decided to return to Manila. In life, one has to make a decision, no matter how difficult it may be and the corresponding risk involved. The decision was spurred by the following. First, to confer with Governor Despujol regarding his Borneo colonization project. Second, to establish the La Liga Filipina in Manila. And third, to prove that Eduardo de Lete was wrong in attacking him in Madrid, that he, Rizal, being comfortable and safe in Hong Kong, had abandoned the country's cause. Lete's attack, which was printed in La Solidaridad on April 15, 1892, portrayed that Rizal as cowardly, egoistic, opportunistic, a patriot in words only. Rizal vehemently protested to Del Dar, the editor of La Solidaridad, saying, "I am more convinced that Lete, in writing to be the article, was too hasty and you permitted yourself to be carried away. Friend or enemy, if the article has harmed me, more it would harm the interests of the Philippines. I am going to activate the propaganda again and fortify the Liga," said by Rizal.
Rizal could not hide his misgiving to Ponce. On May 23, 1892, Rizal confided Ponce regarding the incident why Del Pilar allowed him the publication of the article. Said that, "I am very sorry that Del Pilar allowed the article to be published because it will lead many to believe that there is really a schism among us. I believe that we can well have little misunderstanding and personal differences among ourselves without exhibiting them in public."
Despite the bright prospect of setting up a lucrative medical practice in Hong Kong and being with his family, Rizal could not get the plight of the tenant farmers of Calamba out of his mind. On December 3, 1891, Rizal published an article in the Hong Kong Telegraph describing the unjust eviction and the disruption of the homes of the tenant farmers of Calamba and their persecution. On his voyage of Hong Kong from Merciless, Rizal met William Pryor, the manager of the British North Borneo Company. The company that had obtained a long-term lease from the Sultan of Sulu in 1878 to manage the entire island of North Borneo. After learning of what Pryor planned to grow the British colony, Rizal proposed to set up a Filipino colony in North Borneo with the evicted Calamba tenant. Pryor and his wife Ada enthusiastically welcomed Rizal's proposal, which Rizal later memorialized in an agreement he prepared that was composed of 14 specific points. He mailed it to the friar from Hong Kong. On her husband's behalf, Ada Prior wrote back. She said, "It will be a great advantage for British North Borneo if you are able to bring us a large Philippine contingent, and we shall hail your advent with great pleasure."
Rizal then made plans to visit the friars in Sandakan, North Borneo. 2 months later, Rizal traveled to the place he hoped to call, which was Nueva Calamba, rich fertile land up the Bengkoka River in Marado Bay. Together with Pryor, he met with the governor of North Borneo and discussed his proposal to lease at least 5,000 acres of land, with an option to purchase thousands more for a lease of 950 years. But there was just one problem. The Calamba tenants could not leave the Philippines without the permission of the Spanish Governor General, Ilugio de Espujol. Rizal was aware of this, so even before traveling to North Borneo, he wrote this Espujol on March 21, 1892. And this was the content of his message. I request Your Excellency to grant us the necessary permission to change our nationality, to sell our little property that has been left us by the many disturbances that we have had, and to guarantee the emigration of all those who for some reason or other have incurred the unfavorable criticism of more or less powerful persons who will remain in the Philippines, even after Your Excellency's administration.
The Espujol was incensed by Rizal's letter and feared that Rizal would use his Philippine colony in North Borneo to launch a revolution against Spain. But he did not respond to Rizal's letter. Instead, he asked the Spanish consul in Hong Kong to invite Rizal to return to Manila to discuss the matter personally with him. Rizal's family and friends implored Rizal to reject the Espujol's invitation. It is a trap, they warned him. But Rizal was determined to provide a better life for the evicted tenants of Calamba, and if personally meeting the Espujol in Manila was needed to make it happen, then he would do it.
On June 20, 1892, Rizal wrote a letter to his countrymen explaining his decision to return to Manila. The step which I have taken or which I am about to take is very hazardous, no doubt, and I need not to say that I have thought much about it. I know that almost everybody is against it, but I know also that almost nobody knows what is going on in my heart. I cannot live knowing that many are suffering unjust persecution on my account. I cannot live seeing my brother, sisters, and their numerous families pursued like criminals. I prefer to face death, and I gladly give my life to free so many innocents from such unjust persecution.
Philippines historians have generally interpret his letter as generally referring to the suffering of Filipino people as a whole. But he likely was thinking specifically of the Kalambatan and farmers because they believe in his assurance that justice would prevail. They defied their Dominican landlords and signed the memorial, and they suffered greatly as a consequence. Rizal was likely racked with guilt and what happened to the tenant farmers of Calamba at their unjust persecution on my account.
And then, Rizal arrived in Manila on June 26, 1892 and proceeded to Malacanang Palace to meet Dispuhol. After several days of meetings, Rizal was arrested and incarcerated in Fort Santiago after anti-friar leaflets planted by the friars were found in his luggage. Dispuhol ordered Rizal incarcerated in Fort Santiago for the crime of attempting to decatholize these ever-Spanish Philippine islands. He was later deported to the Pitan in Zamboanga. When the Philippine Revolution broke out in 1896, Rizal was accused by the friars of fomenting and instigating it, even though he was confined to the island of the Pitan. After a friarsical trial, Rizal was sentenced to death and executed on December 30, 1896.
So lastly, let's just talk about the last Hong Kong letters of Rizal. So relatives and friends of Rizal opposed his decision to return home because it was like bearding the lions in their den. His sister Trinidad carefully warned him to desist, for here they will kill you, she said. Not even the fear of death could deter Rizal from his decision. On June 19, 1892, he spent his 31st birthday in Hong Kong. Evidently, he had a premonition of his death for the following day. June 20, he wrote 2 letters which he sealed, inscribed on each envelope to be opened after my death, and gave them to his friend Dr. Marquez for safekeeping. In the pages of history, there is scarcely a parallel for these 2 sealed letters, which were virtually Rizal's political testament.
The first letter of Rizal was addressed to his parents, brethren, and friends, which he said, "The affection that I have ever professed for you suggests this step, and time alone can tell whether or not it is sensible. The outcome judges things according to the consequences, but whether the result be favorable or unfavorable. It may always be said that duty urged me, so if I die in doing it, it will not matter. I realize how much suffering I have caused you, yet I do not regret what I have done. Rather, if I had to begin over again, I should do just the same. For what I have done has been only in pursuit of my duty. Gladly do I go to expose myself to peril, not as an expiation of misdeeds. For in this matter, I believe myself guiltless of any but to complete my work, and so that I myself may offer the example of which I have always preached. A man ought to die for duty and his principles. I hold fast to every ideas which I have advanced as to the condition and future of our country, and shall willingly die for it, and even more, willingly sacrifice all to secure justice and peace for you. With pleasure, then, I risk life to save so many innocent persons, so many nieces and nephews, so many children of friends, and children too of others who are not even friends, who are suffering on my account. What am I? A bachelor, practically without a family and sufficiently undeceived as to life. I have had many disappointments, and the future before me is gloomy, and will be gloomy if light does not illuminate it with the dawn of a better day for my native land. On the other hand, there are many persons filled with hope and ambition, who perhaps might be happier if I were dead. And then I hope my enemies would be satisfied and stop persecuting so many entirely innocent people. To a certain extent, their hatred is justifiable as to myself and my parents and relatives. Should fate go against me, you will all understand that I shall die happy in the thought that my death will end all your troubles. Return to our country, and may you be happy in it. Till the last moment of my life, I shall be thinking of you and wishing you all good fortune and happiness.
So in summary, Dr. Rizal did not left the Philippines just to expose himself or just to have a happy trip to other country. He left with the aims of pursuing his dreams, which was to practice and improve his knowledge about his profession. So by that, he will be able to be the person who can offer help to his people. He will do anything to help and serve to his country, and most likely to secure the justice and peace for all his friends, brethren, and also for his family who suffer from the rules of Spaniards. With pleasure, he risked his life to save and secure the justice and peace for so many innocent persons, a friend or even the enemy of him. The second letter of Rizal was addressed to the Filipinos. The step which I am taking, or rather I am about to take, is undoubtedly risky, and it's unnecessary to say that I have considered it for some time. I understand that almost everyone is opposed to it, but I know also that hardly anybody else understands what is in my heart. I cannot live on seeing so many suffered and just persecution on my account. I cannot bear the sight of my sisters and their numerous families treated like criminals. I prefer death and cheerfully shall relinquish life to free so many innocent persons from such unjust persecution. I appreciate the fact that at present the future of our country gravitates in some degree around me. That at my death many will feel triumphant, and those many are now wishing for my fall, wishing for my fall. But what of it? I hold duties of conscience above all else. I have obligations to the families who suffer, to my aged parents whose sight strikes me to the heart. I know that I am alone. Only with my death I can make them happy, returning them to their native land and to a peaceful life at home. I am all my parents have, but our country has many, many more sons who can take my place and even do my work better. Besides, I wish to show those who deny us the boon of patriotism that we know how to die for duty and of principles. What matters that if one dies for what one loves, for native's land and being held there? If I thought that I were the only resource for the communication of policy of progress in the Philippines, and were I convinced that countrymen were going to make use of my services, perhaps I should hesitate about taking this step. But there are others who can take my place, who can do my work to advantage. Furthermore, there are perchance those who hold me as an unnecessary being, and so my services are not utilized and I am reduced to inactivity. Always have I loved our unhappy land, and I am sure that I shall continue loving it till my last moment. In case men prove unjust to me, my career, my life, my happiness, all I have sacrificed for love of it. Whatever my fate, I shall die blessing it and longing for the dawn of its redemption.
To summarize Rizal's second letter, which he was addressed to Filipinos, he said that the step he is going through is really risky. Although he know that almost everyone were against to it, but he cannot bear to see so many Filipinos suffering for unjust persecution. Rizal also said that if he died, many will going to be triumphant, for there are many people who are wish him to fall or gone. Then he asked a question to himself, but what of it? Why people wish me to die? Is it because I hold duties of conscience above anyone else? Or is it because I have many obligations to many families that were suffered? He also said that he is not alone, for he died. It makes the people happy. They can return their native land and to have a peaceful life. Lastly, he stated that he will always love our country even it is unhappy land. Surely that I will he will continue loving it till the last moment of his life.
So that was the end of our discussion.
We hope that you have gained more knowledge about Rizal's life, works, and writings in Hong Kong.
Once again, I am Shahida S. Karinda.
And I am Aslamia K. Mentang.
A pleasant day and keep safe, everyone.